Deep beneath the Smithsonian institution, past the public floors and research levels, lies Warehouse Complex B7. Officially, it doesn't exist. The service elevator that accesses it requires 2 keycards and facial recognition. Inside, 47,000 artifacts that will never see daylight. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, former senior curator, called it humanity's stolen heritage before her abrupt resignations in 2019. 3 months later, she was found dead in an apparent suicide. But Elizabeth left behind something explosive, detailed inventories of what's really down there, ancient batteries that predate electricity by millennia, genetic samples proving extinct human species lived alongside modern humans, maps showing continents that didn't exist when they were carved. Tonight, we're exposing the global network of institutions that have spent centuries stealing our real history, because the warehouse's vault is just the beginning. The emergency exit alarm shrieked through the corridors of the National Museum of Natural History at 3:47 a.m. on September 15th, 2018. Security footage shows Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell badge swiping through restricted access points, moving with purpose toward the service elevators. She carried a manila folder and what appeared to be a small recording device. By morning, she had vanished from the building's official records. Her employment status changed to administrative leave, then simply disappeared. 3 months later, Park Police found her body in the Potomac River. What Elizabeth discovered that night would challenge everything the public believes about human history. According to the documents she managed to smuggle out, the basement complex beneath America's most trusted museum houses a collection that would fundamentally rewrite our understanding of civilization itself. These aren't just ancient pottery shards or primitive tools gathering dust in storage. They're artifacts that prove advanced technologies existed thousands of years before their supposed invention. Evidence of lost civilizations that achieved scientific breakthroughs we're only rediscovering today. Genetic material that suggests human evolution followed a far more complex path than textbooks dare to admit. The facility Elizabeth penetrated stretches across multiple underground levels, each requiring increasingly sophisticated security clearances. Level B3 houses overflow collections, legitimate artifacts awaiting research or display rotation. Level B5 contains culturally sensitive materials, items deemed too controversial for public viewing due to their potential to offend various cultural or religious groups. But Level B7, the deepest accessible floor, operates under a classification that doesn't officially exist within museum protocols. Former maintenance worker Marcus Rodriguez worked in the basement complex for 12 years before his termination in 2017. According to his testimony, captured in a recorded interview with Elizabeth Hartwell, B7 required special clearance from unnamed federal agencies. "You didn't just walk down there," Rodriguez explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "They had biometric scanners, weight sensors in the floor, cameras that could see in complete darkness. And the artifacts down there, they weren't like anything in the public galleries." Rodriguez described rooms lined with climate-controlled cases containing objects that defied easy categorization. Metallic spheres covered in intricate geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Stone tablets inscribed with symbols that resembled no known ancient language, yet somehow felt familiar. Most disturbing were the biological specimens, tissue samples, bone fragments, and what appeared to be complete skeletal remains of humanoid beings that didn't match any recognized species in the fossil record. The leaked inventory that Elizabeth managed to document before her death provides chilling specifics. Item B7447. a copper alloy disc showing electrical conductivity properties that shouldn't exist in materials dated to 3000 BC. The metallurgical analysis, conducted by outside contractors and sealed immediately afterward, revealed manufacturing techniques requiring industrial-level precision and heat treatment capabilities. The disc's surface contains microscopic engravings forming patterns that match modern circuit board designs with disturbing accuracy. Item B7091 challenges our understanding of ancient knowledge even more dramatically. Carbon dating places this clay tablet at approximately 4,500 years old, yet the astronomical calculations etched into its surface accurately predict solar eclipses through 2050 AD. The mathematical formulas employ concepts not officially discovered until the Renaissance. When researchers input the tablet's equations into modern computer simulations, they generate star charts with precision matching contemporary satellite observations. Perhaps most unsettling are the genetic samples stored in B7's biological wing. According to Elizabeth's documentation, these specimens represent DNA sequences that don't align with accepted models of human evolution. Some samples show genetic markers suggesting interbreeding between modern humans and unknown hominid species. Others contain sequences that appear artificially modified, as if ancient genetic engineers possess knowledge that rivals our current biotechnology capabilities. The timeline of how these artifacts arrived at the facility reveals a pattern of systematic acquisition spanning decades. Many items trace back to archaeological expeditions funded through shell companies connected to government agencies. Others arrived through emergency acquisitions, situations where discoveries threatened to become public knowledge before proper suppression protocols could be implemented. In several cases, entire dig sites were classified and sealed after yielding materials deemed too sensitive for standard academic channels. Dr. Jonathan Reeves, who served as Elizabeth's supervisor until 2016, provided additional context in phone interviews conducted shortly before his own suspicious death in a car accident. According to Reeves, the basement complex operates under directives that bypass normal museum governance. "We received instructions from agencies that technically don't exist," he explained. "People would arrive with federal credentials and authority to remove items from our research queue. No questions asked, no documentation provided. They just disappear into the basement levels." The psychological impact on staff with access to these materials appears significant. Multiple employees reported experiencing disturbing dreams, periods of disorientation, and what they described as temporal displacement episodes, moments where they lost track of time while examining certain artifacts. Several researchers requested transfers to other departments, citing concerns about their mental health. Others simply quit without explanation, often relocating to different states shortly afterward. The security protocols surrounding B7 extend beyond the physical building. According to leaked internal communications, staff members undergo regular psychological evaluations and periodic polygraph examinations. Their personal communications are monitored, and their family members' activities are discreetly observed. The message is clear: absolute silence about basement operations is not negotiable. Elizabeth's final recorded notes, discovered on an encrypted drive hidden in her apartment, describe her growing realization that the concealment operation extends far beyond a single institution. Cross-referencing shipping manifests and transfer documentation revealed connections to similar facilities at museums worldwide. Artifacts would arrive from the British Museum, the Louvre, institutions in Berlin, Moscow, Beijing, all part of what she termed a global archaeological suppression network. The most damning evidence Elizabeth uncovered involves the deliberate destruction of artifacts that proved too dangerous even for secure storage. Incineration logs document the disposal of materials that pose unacceptable risks to established historical narratives. These destroyed items included carbon-datable proof of advanced civilizations predating accepted timelines by thousands of years. Evidence of technological sophistication that would require complete revision of textbook chronologies. Most significantly, artifacts suggesting that human development followed paths that contradict fundamental assumptions about our species' origins. What drives an institution dedicated to education and discovery to actively suppress the very knowledge it claims to preserve? The answer lies in understanding the forces that control not just what we learn about the past, but what we're allowed to believe about human potential itself. Elizabeth's investigation revealed financial connections between museum operations and industries that profit from maintaining current technological dependencies. Patent holders whose innovations would become obsolete if ancient alternatives were acknowledged. Energy companies whose business models depend on scarcity narratives that don't account for historical precedents of abundant, clean power sources. The human cost of this suppression extends beyond individual careers destroyed or lives ended. Every artifact locked away in B7 represents knowledge that could advance medical understanding, environmental solutions, or technological breakthroughs, ancient metallurgy techniques that could revolutionize manufacturing, agricultural methods that could address food security, energy systems that could eliminate dependence on fossil fuels. Instead, these solutions remain buried in basement vaults, while humanity struggles with challenges our ancestors apparently solved millennia ago. Elizabeth's death marked the end of one investigation, but her documentation provides the foundation for exposing a conspiracy that spans continents and centuries. The basement complex beneath the National Museum of Natural History represents just one node in a network designed to control human knowledge itself. Similar facilities operate in the shadows of the world's most prestigious cultural institutions, each one guarding secrets that could transform our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of becoming. The question that haunted Elizabeth's final days continues to resonate. If these artifacts are authentic, what other discoveries remain hidden in the vaults of institutions we trust to preserve and share human knowledge? Her investigation revealed connections spanning the globe, from the Vatican's legendary secret archives to basement levels beneath museums in London, Berlin, and beyond. Each institution maintains its own collection of impossible artifacts, its own reasons for keeping them hidden, its own methods for ensuring silence. The suppression of human history, it seems, requires a truly international effort. The weight of Elizabeth's revelations presses against the mind like ancient stone, heavy, undeniable, transformative. Yet her discovery beneath the Smithsonian represents merely the first thread in a tapestry of concealment that stretches across continents and centuries. To understand the true scope of this suppression, one must venture beyond American soil to institutions where the very foundations of Western civilization rest upon carefully guarded secrets. Cardinal Giuseppe Mazzarino received the encrypted message at exactly 11:37 p.m. on March 21st, 2020. The communication, originating from an untraceable server, contained a single line of text. The Magdalene Codex has been compromised. Within minutes, emergency protocols activated throughout Vatican City. Swiss guards sealed access points to the Apostolic Archive. Digital security systems switched to maximum encryption. Most significantly, a small team of archivists began the delicate process of relocating specific documents from their traditional storage locations to chambers that exist on no official blueprints. The Magdalene Codex represents one of thousands of documents housed in what Vatican insiders call the Heretical collection. materials deemed too dangerous for scholarly examination, too explosive for public knowledge, too contradictory to foundational church doctrine to risk exposure. Unlike the Vatican's secret archives, which contain diplomatic correspondence and administrative records eventually accessible to qualified researchers, the Heretical collection operates under protocols that ensure absolute, perpetual secrecy. Father Antonio Benedetti served as an archivist in the restricted sections for 23 years before his mysterious disappearance in 2018. According to testimony he provided to investigative journalist Maria Santos shortly before vanishing, the Vatican maintains approximately 40,000 documents that directly contradict established Christian theology. These aren't simply alternative interpretations of familiar texts, but primary source materials that fundamentally challenge the historical foundations of Christianity itself. The Codex, carbon dated to approximately 50 AD, contains first-hand accounts of Jesus' teachings that differ dramatically from canonical Gospels. According to Benedetti's description, the document presents Jesus not as a divine figure, but as a highly advanced teacher sharing knowledge derived from much older traditions. The text describes specific techniques for consciousness expansion, healing methods that utilize sound frequencies, and mathematical principles that wouldn't be discovered by Western science for another 15 centuries. More disturbing than the content itself is the document's provenance. Archaeological analysis suggests the papyrus originated in regions now known as Tibet, written in a dialect that combines Aramaic with linguistic elements from ancient Sanskrit. If authentic, this material implies that Jesus traveled extensively throughout Asia, studying with masters whose wisdom traditions predate Christianity by thousands of years. Such revelations would demolish claims of Christianity's unique divine origin, reducing it to one interpretation among many of universal spiritual principles. The Vatican's suppression of contrary evidence extends far beyond individual documents. Dr. Heinrich Müller, a paleographer granted temporary access to restricted materials in 2015, discovered systematic patterns of historical manipulation spanning centuries. According to his confidential report, later leaked through anonymous sources, church archivists have deliberately altered, destroyed, or concealed evidence that would challenge orthodox chronologies of Christian development. Müller documented specific examples of this editorial process. Ancient manuscripts showing Jesus married to Mary Magdalene, with detailed genealogies of their descendants. Letters from early Christian communities describing spiritual practices that more closely resemble Eastern meditation traditions than contemporary worship. Most significantly, carbon-dated artifacts proving that symbols now considered uniquely Christian, the cross, the fish, various geometric patterns, were in widespread use among mystery schools throughout the Mediterranean basin centuries before Jesus' birth. The collection includes materials that challenge not just Christian history, but the entire framework of Western religious development. The Sumerian tablets, acquired through undisclosed channels in 1938, contain creation stories that parallel biblical accounts with disturbing precision. However, these tablets predate Hebrew texts by over 2,000 years and present the stories as historical records rather than spiritual allegories. The implications suggest that Judeo-Christian mythology represents recycled material from much older sources. Perhaps most controversial are the hybrid documents, texts describing interactions between early humans and beings possessing advanced technological capabilities. These materials, written in multiple ancient languages and collected from archaeological sites worldwide, consistently describe visitors who shared knowledge of agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy, and governance with primitive human societies. The Vatican's suppression of these documents becomes more comprehensible when considering their theological implications. If humanity received its civilizational advances from external sources, what becomes of humanity's special relationship with a Christian God? Cardinal Mazzarino's role in maintaining these secrets extends beyond simple archival management. According to sources within Vatican intelligence networks, he coordinates with secular institutions to ensure that archaeological discoveries threatening church doctrine never reach public attention. This cooperation includes financial support for expeditions that systematically remove controversial artifacts from dig sites before they can be properly catalogued by independent researchers. The Vatican's influence on archaeological scholarship operates through multiple channels. The Pontifical Commission for Sacred Archaeology maintains oversight of excavations throughout formerly Christian territories. Universities with religious affiliations receive funding that comes with implicit restrictions on publishing research that contradicts orthodox positions. Individual scholars who pursue inconvenient lines of inquiry often find their careers mysteriously stalled, their funding withdrawn, their access to materials permanently revoked. Dr. Margaret Thompson experienced this suppression firsthand while researching early Christian communities in Egypt. Her work with Coptic manuscripts revealed systematic differences between original texts and later translations that formed the basis of canonical scripture. When she attempted to publish her findings, Vatican representatives approached her university with concerns about cultural sensitivity. Within months, her research grants were terminated, her academic position eliminated, and her reputation systematically destroyed through whisper campaigns, questioning her methodology and mental stability. The psychological pressure on Vatican archivists with knowledge of suppressed materials appears particularly intense. Father Benedetti's testimony describes a culture of enforced ignorance, where staff members are deliberately kept uninformed about the broader implications of materials they handle. Individual archivists work with fragments of the collection, never gaining access to enough material to understand the full scope of contradictory evidence. Those who begin connecting patterns face immediate reassignment, often to remote parishes in regions with limited communication infrastructure. The Vatican's digital initiatives represent a new frontier in historical suppression. The massive project to digitize archival materials allows for unprecedented control over access to primary sources. Documents can be selectively included or excluded from databases. Search algorithms can be programmed to prevent researchers from discovering materials that challenge orthodox positions. Most significantly, digital copies can be altered without leaving traces detectable through traditional scholarly methods. Recent technological developments have intensified Vatican concerns about maintaining secrecy. Advanced dating techniques, DNA analysis of ancient materials, and satellite archaeology threaten to expose suppressed sites and artifacts before church officials can implement containment protocols. According to leaked internal communications, Vatican intelligence operations now include cybersecurity teams tasked with monitoring archaeological databases worldwide, identifying potentially problematic discoveries before they can reach broader academic communities. The financial resources dedicated to maintaining these secrets suggest their perceived importance to church survival. Conservative estimates place Vatican spending on suppression activities at over €200 million annually. This includes direct payments to archaeological teams, funding for cooperative universities, maintenance of secure storage facilities, and compensation for individuals willing to remain silent about their discoveries. The investment represents a substantial portion of Vatican resources, suggesting that church leadership views historical truth as an existential threat to institutional survival. The human stories behind Vatican suppression operations reveal the personal costs of institutional secrecy. families separated when researchers ask too many questions, careers destroyed for pursuing inconvenient truths, scholars forced to choose between intellectual integrity and professional survival. The pattern repeats across decades, leaving a trail of broken lives and abandoned research projects that might have transformed human understanding of our spiritual and historical development. Yet Vatican efforts to control historical narrative face increasing challenges from technological advancement and global information sharing. Anonymous leaking platforms allow whistleblowers to share suppressed materials without fear of immediate identification. International cooperation among researchers makes it increasingly difficult to suppress discoveries across multiple jurisdictions. Most significantly, carbon dating and other analytical techniques continue to provide objective evidence that contradicts official chronologies regardless of institutional preferences. The question that emerges from examining Vatican suppression activities extends beyond simple institutional self-preservation. If religious authorities possess evidence that fundamentally contradicts their public teachings, what obligations do they have to share that knowledge with humanity? The tension between protecting institutional authority and advancing human understanding creates moral complexities that extend far beyond Vatican walls, touching every institution that claims to serve truth while simultaneously concealing it. As investigations into Vatican archives reveal the scope of suppressed materials, patterns emerge connecting Roman suppression efforts with similar operations conducted by secular institutions worldwide. The networks of cooperation between religious and academic authorities suggest a coordinated approach to controlling historical knowledge that transcends individual organizational boundaries. Understanding the Vatican's role in this suppression requires examining how other powerful institutions manage their own collections of inconvenient truths. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation about Vatican operations lies not in what they've hidden, but in how seamlessly their suppression protocols integrate with secular archaeological establishments. The same shipping manifests that troubled Elizabeth Hartwell in her final weeks show regular transfers between Vatican storage facilities and museums across Europe. These institutions, built upon the ruins of empires that once conquered the world, maintain their own vast collections of artifacts that challenge everything the public believes about human civilization. The shipping manifest bore no official letterhead, no government seal, no indication of its extraordinary contents. Dated November 14, 1857, the document simply listed miscellaneous archaeological specimens transferred from the East India Company warehouses to the British Museum's newly constructed basement storage facility. What the manifest failed to mention was that these specimens included technological artifacts that would fundamentally challenge every assumption about pre-colonial civilization. More than a century and a half later, those same artifacts remain locked away in sub-basement levels that the public will never see. Dr. Rajesh Mehta discovered the manifest quite by accident while researching colonial-era acquisition records for his doctoral thesis at Cambridge. The document had been misfiled among routine administrative papers, its significance overlooked by generations of archivists. But Mehta recognized immediately that the items described, precision-engineered metalwork, astronomical instruments of unknown origin, texts written in undeciphered scripts, represented far more than the primitive curiosities typically associated with colonial collecting practices. What Mehta uncovered through months of painstaking research was evidence of systematic suppression spanning the entire duration of British imperial expansion. Colonial administrators hadn't simply looted artifacts for display in London museums. They had specifically targeted and concealed evidence of advanced pre-colonial civilizations, ensuring that the technological and intellectual achievements of conquered peoples would never challenge narratives of European superiority. The basement levels beneath the British Museum House, what former curator Dr. Amanda Thornfield called the Empire's greatest shame, artifacts proving that many of Britain's colonial subjects possessed scientific knowledge that surpassed European understanding by centuries. According to Thornfield, who provided testimony before her sudden retirement in 2019, these materials include metallurgical samples showing heat treatment techniques not developed in Europe until the Industrial Revolution, astronomical calculations demonstrating mathematical concepts that wouldn't reach British universities until the 20th century, and medical texts describing surgical procedures that modern practitioners are only beginning to understand. The systematic nature of this concealment becomes clear when examining acquisition patterns across different colonial territories. In India, British forces specifically targeted ancient libraries and technical workshops, removing materials that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of chemistry, metallurgy, and engineering. From Africa came artifacts showing advanced knowledge of agriculture, medicine, and environmental management that contradicted European assumptions about primitive societies. Australian Aboriginal sites yielded astronomical instruments and navigational devices that revealed complex understanding of celestial mechanics. Perhaps most damaging to imperial narratives were discoveries from the Americas. Spanish conquistadors had already destroyed vast libraries of Mayan and Aztec knowledge, but British expeditions in the 19th century uncovered surviving caches that proved indigenous civilizations had achieved technological breakthroughs that European science was centuries away from matching. These included texts describing powered flight, detailed anatomical drawings showing advanced surgical techniques, and mathematical calculations that wouldn't be discovered in Europe until the development of modern physics. Colonial administrator Sir Reginald Whitmore documented this suppression process in private correspondence, later discovered in family archives following his estate's liquidation in 2014. According to Whitmore's letters, written between 1862 and 1891, colonial authorities operated under explicit instructions to confiscate any materials that might undermine confidence in European intellectual supremacy. These items were systematically shipped to London, where they disappeared into museum storage facilities designed specifically to prevent scholarly access. The human cost of this suppression extended far beyond simple theft of cultural artifacts. Indigenous knowledge systems that could have advanced global understanding of medicine, agriculture, and environmental management were deliberately destroyed or hidden. Colonial subjects who possessed advanced technical knowledge were often eliminated entirely, ensuring that their expertise died with them rather than challenging European monopolies on technological development. Dr. Sarah Chen, a materials scientist who gained temporary access to restricted collections during a 2017 research exchange, documented artifacts that fundamentally challenge accepted timelines of technological development. Among the items she examined were metal alloys showing atomic structures that shouldn't be possible using pre-industrial techniques, textiles woven with fibers that demonstrate knowledge of polymer chemistry, and carved stones showing precision that requires computer-controlled machinery. The suppression apparatus developed by British colonial authorities created templates that other European powers quickly adopted. French colonial administrators in Southeast Asia, German expeditions in Africa, and Dutch operations in Indonesia all implemented similar protocols for concealing evidence of advanced pre-colonial achievements. The result was a coordinated effort across multiple empires to ensure that colonized peoples appeared technologically primitive in historical records. Museum records reveal the elaborate security measures developed to maintain these secrets. Sub-basement storage areas were constructed with independent ventilation systems, separate electrical networks, and access controls that bypassed normal administrative oversight. Staff members working in these areas underwent extensive background investigations and signed confidentiality agreements that remained binding even after their employment ended. Most significantly, the classification systems used to catalogue suppressed materials operated entirely outside standard museum databases. The psychological impact on museum staff exposed to these collections appears profound. Multiple employees reported experiencing what they described as cognitive dissonance episodes, periods where their understanding of history became fundamentally unstable. Several researchers suffered nervous breakdowns after realizing the implications of materials they were studying. Others simply resigned without explanation, often leaving academic careers entirely rather than continuing to participate in the suppression. Dr. Marcus Blackwood, who served as a senior curator from 1987 to 2012, provided detailed testimony about museum suppression protocols before his death in a climbing accident in 2020. According to Blackwood, the British Museum maintains active suppression operations coordinated with government intelligence services. Archaeological discoveries that threaten established historical narratives are immediately classified and removed from standard research channels. International cooperation ensures that similar suppression occurs simultaneously across multiple countries, preventing researchers from accessing contradictory evidence even through foreign institutions. The digital age has created new challenges for maintaining colonial-era suppressions. Advanced imaging techniques can reveal details in artifacts that weren't visible to earlier researchers. International databases allow scholars to compare materials across institutions, potentially exposing patterns of systematic concealment. Most problematically, genetic analysis of ancient materials can provide objective evidence of technological capabilities that contradict official timelines, regardless of institutional preferences. Recent leaks have exposed the financial networks supporting ongoing suppression operations. Corporate sponsors, many with connections to industries that profit from maintaining technological dependencies, provide funding for museum operations that keep inconvenient discoveries hidden. Patent holders whose innovations would become obsolete if ancient alternatives were acknowledged have particular interests in ensuring that historical evidence remains buried. Energy companies whose business models depend on scarcity narratives benefit from suppressing evidence of abundant, clean power sources developed by ancient civilizations. The international scope of museum suppression becomes evident when examining transfer records between major institutions. Artifacts regularly move between the British Museum, the Louvre, Berlin's museums, and institutions in Moscow and Beijing, all part of coordinated efforts to ensure that no single researcher can access enough material to understand the full scope of suppressed knowledge. These transfers often occur during periods of political tension, when public attention is focused elsewhere and controversial movements can proceed without scrutiny. Contemporary suppression efforts extend beyond simple concealment to active disinformation campaigns. Museum publications deliberately misdate artifacts, attributing advanced technologies to much later periods when European development makes them seem less anomalous. Archaeological reports are edited to remove references to inconvenient discoveries. Educational materials are designed to reinforce narratives of linear technological progress that positions European development as the pinnacle of human achievement. The cost of maintaining these suppressions continues to escalate as technological advancement makes concealment increasingly difficult. Museum budgets allocate substantial resources to security operations, digital control systems, and international coordination efforts that serve no educational purpose. Staff members spend significant time managing suppression protocols rather than advancing scholarly understanding. Most tragically, knowledge that could address contemporary global challenges remains locked away while humanity struggles with problems that ancient civilizations apparently solved. Yet cracks continue to appear in the suppression apparatus constructed during the colonial era. Whistleblowers within museum systems provide evidence of ongoing concealment operations. International human rights organizations pressure institutions to return stolen cultural materials, potentially exposing suppressed artifacts in the process. Most significantly, indigenous communities increasingly demand access to their own cultural heritage, creating legal and political pressures that threaten institutional control over historical narratives. The question that emerges from examining British Museum suppression operations extends beyond simple institutional accountability. If European museums possess evidence that fundamentally contradicts narratives of Western technological supremacy, what obligations do they have to acknowledge the advanced achievements of colonized peoples? The tension between protecting institutional authority and advancing human understanding reveals the continuing legacy of imperial thinking in contemporary academic and cultural institutions. The patterns established in London's basement vaults find their most extreme expression in institutions shaped by ideological rather than simply imperial considerations. As evidence of British suppression operations accumulates, attention turns to museums and research facilities where political doctrine, rather than colonial advantage, determined which artifacts would see daylight and which would disappear forever into the shadows of institutional secrecy. The metal briefcase sat unopened in Allied custody for 78 years, its contents deemed too sensitive for immediate examination. Seized from the ruins of Wewelsburg Castle in May 1945, the case bore the distinctive eagle and swastika emblem of the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi research organization dedicated to proving Aryan racial superiority through archaeological discovery. When declassification protocols finally allowed access in 2023, researchers discovered something far more disturbing than expected propaganda materials: detailed documentation of archaeological discoveries that challenged everything modern science believed about ancient human capabilities. Dr. Klaus Weber, the German archaeologist tasked with cataloguing the briefcase contents, found himself confronting evidence of Nazi expeditions that had uncovered technologies and knowledge systems that seemed impossible for their supposed time periods. More troubling still, the documents revealed that Allied forces had been aware of these discoveries for decades, systematically suppressing them not because they supported Nazi ideology, but because they threatened fundamental assumptions about human technological development. The Ahnenerbe, established by Heinrich Himmler in 1935, originally pursued archaeological evidence to support theories of Aryan racial supremacy. Their expeditions to Tibet, Antarctica, and various European sites were intended to prove that a master race had once ruled the world, leaving behind monuments and artifacts that demonstrated their advanced capabilities. What they actually discovered defied their racial theories entirely, revealing evidence of technological sophistication that appeared to span multiple continents and cultures with no regard for ethnic boundaries. The briefcase contained field reports from 7 expeditions conducted between 1938 and 1944, each documenting discoveries that contradicted accepted archaeological timelines. The Tibet expedition of 1938, led by SS officer Ernst Schäfer, uncovered libraries containing texts that described powered flight, mechanical computation, and energy generation techniques using principles that wouldn't be discovered by Western science for decades. Rather than supporting theories of Aryan supremacy, these texts suggested that advanced knowledge had existed simultaneously across cultures that Nazi ideology claimed were racially inferior. Perhaps most significant was the Antarctic expedition of 1939, documented in encrypted reports that weren't decoded until 2019. According to these materials, Nazi explorers discovered artificial structures beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, including what appeared to be technological installations showing no signs of degradation despite being buried for millennia. The structures contained artifacts that seemed to combine biological and mechanical components in ways that challenged basic understanding of ancient technological capabilities. The expedition to the Bosnian pyramid complex in 1941 yielded discoveries that particularly disturbed Nazi researchers. Rather than finding evidence of Germanic superiority, they uncovered proof that the structures had been built using construction techniques that surpassed contemporary engineering capabilities. Underground chambers contained what appeared to be energy generation equipment, while carved stones showed mathematical equations describing principles that wouldn't be formally recognized until the development of quantum physics. Dr. Hermann Voerth, one of the Ahnenerbe's founding members, documented his growing concern about the implications of their discoveries in private correspondence later found in Soviet archives. According to Voerth's letters, written between 1940 and 1943, the expeditions were uncovering evidence that completely contradicted Nazi racial theories. Advanced technologies appeared to have developed simultaneously across multiple cultures, suggesting global knowledge networks that predated any historical record of long-distance communication. The most classified materials in the briefcase concerned what Nazi researchers called impossible artifacts, objects that demonstrated technological capabilities that shouldn't exist in the archaeological record. These included metallic devices showing atomic-level precision manufacturing, crystalline structures that appeared to store and transmit energy, and biological specimens that had been artificially modified using techniques that paralleled modern genetic engineering. Allied intelligence services became aware of these discoveries through intercepted communications and captured personnel interrogations. Rather than dismissing the findings as Nazi propaganda, American and British researchers conducted independent verification studies that confirmed the authenticity of many artifacts. The decision to suppress these discoveries arose not from scientific skepticism, but from recognition that acknowledging advanced, ancient technologies would undermine post-war narratives about technological progress and Western scientific supremacy. Operation Paperclip, the American program that recruited German scientists after the war, included specific protocols for handling Ahnenerbe research materials. Scientists who had worked on archaeological projects were debriefed extensively about their discoveries, then assigned to classified research programs that attempted to reverse engineer ancient technologies. The knowledge gained from these efforts contributed to developments in aerospace engineering, materials science, and energy research that were publicly attributed to conventional scientific advancement. Soviet forces conducted parallel operations, capturing Ahnenerbe facilities and researchers in their occupation zones. According to documents released from Russian archives in 2021, Soviet scientists spent decades attempting to replicate technologies discovered during Nazi expeditions. Their efforts led to breakthroughs in metallurgy and energy research that gave the Soviet Union significant advantages during the Cold War, though the original sources of this knowledge remained classified. The institutional networks developed to suppress Nazi archaeological discoveries created templates for handling controversial findings throughout the Cold War period. Research facilities were established with dual functions, publicly conducting conventional scientific research while secretly studying artifacts that challenged accepted historical timelines. Personnel were compartmentalized to prevent any individual from understanding the full scope of suppressed materials. Most significantly, International cooperation protocols ensured that suppression efforts remained coordinated across different national intelligence services. Dr. Maria Hoffmann, a contemporary German archaeologist who gained access to previously classified materials through Freedom of Information requests, documented the continuing suppression of Nazi-era discoveries. According to her research, published in limited circulation academic journals in 2022, artifacts discovered during Ahnenerbe expeditions remain under government control in facilities across Germany, the United States, and Russia. These materials continue to be studied by classified research programs, but their existence is denied in public archaeological databases. The psychological impact on researchers exposed to these materials appears particularly severe. Multiple scientists involved in post-war analysis projects suffered nervous breakdowns or experienced what military psychologists termed paradigm shock, the complete collapse of fundamental beliefs about reality. Several researchers abandoned their careers entirely, rather than continuing to work with materials that challenge their understanding of human technological development. Contemporary suppression efforts face increasing challenges from technological advancement and changing political circumstances. Digital archaeology techniques can detect artificial structures and anomalous materials without requiring physical access to classified sites. International human rights organizations pressure governments to acknowledge historical crimes, potentially exposing suppressed archaeological evidence in the process. Most significantly, climate change is melting Antarctic ice sheets, potentially revealing structures that have remained hidden since Nazi expeditions first documented them. The ethical complexities surrounding Nazi archaeological discoveries create unique challenges for contemporary researchers. Acknowledging the authenticity of Ahnenerbe findings risks legitimizing Nazi research methods and potentially providing ammunition for neo-Nazi movements. Yet suppressing evidence of advanced ancient technologies perpetuates institutional dishonesty and prevents scientific advancement that could benefit humanity. The tension between historical accuracy and political considerations continues to shape suppression policies more than 8 decades after the original discoveries. Recent leaks have exposed ongoing research programs that continue to study artifacts discovered during Nazi expeditions. Corporate contractors working on classified aerospace projects report examining materials that demonstrate manufacturing techniques beyond current capabilities. Energy companies conduct research on crystalline structures that appear to generate power through unknown mechanisms. Most troubling, genetic research facilities analyze biological specimens that show evidence of artificial modification using techniques that surpass contemporary biotechnology. The international scope of Nazi archaeological suppression becomes evident when examining transfer records between research facilities in different countries. Artifacts regularly move between classified installations in Germany, the United States, Russia, and other nations, all part of coordinated efforts to prevent any single research team from understanding the full implications of discovered technologies. These transfers often occur during periods of political tension, when public attention is focused elsewhere and controversial movements can proceed without scrutiny. The financial resources dedicated to maintaining Nazi-era suppressions suggest their perceived importance to national security establishments. Conservative estimates place current spending on related research and containment operations at over $500 million annually across multiple countries. This includes maintenance of secure storage facilities, compensation for researchers willing to work under classification constraints, and international coordination efforts that serve no apparent public benefit. Yet the technological implications of suppressed Nazi discoveries extend far beyond simple historical curiosity. If ancient civilizations possessed advanced energy generation capabilities, Understanding these systems could address contemporary climate change challenges. If biological modification techniques existed in prehistory, analyzing these methods could advance medical understanding. If manufacturing technologies demonstrated atomic-level precision thousands of years ago, replicating these processes could revolutionize industrial production. The human stories behind Nazi archaeological suppression reveal the personal costs of institutional secrecy spanning generations. Families separated when researchers ask uncomfortable questions about classified projects. Careers destroyed for pursuing lines of inquiry that lead toward suppressed materials. Scientists forced to choose between intellectual integrity and professional survival in research programs that prioritize secrecy over scientific advancement. The question that emerges from examining Nazi archaeological legacies extends beyond simple institutional accountability. If evidence exists of advanced ancient technologies, what obligations do contemporary governments have to share this knowledge with humanity? The tension between protecting perceived national security interests and advancing scientific understanding creates moral complexities that continue to shape suppression policies decades after the original discoveries. As evidence of Nazi-era suppression operations accumulates, patterns emerge connecting German research with similar programs conducted by other major powers during the same period. The networks of cooperation between different national intelligence services suggest a coordinated approach to controlling archaeological knowledge that transcended ideological boundaries, revealing suppression as a fundamental tool of state power rather than simply a product of particular political systems. The telegram arrived at the Kremlin at 4:23 a.m. on August 7, 1956, marked with the highest classification codes available to Soviet intelligence services. Its contents, decoded decades later through leaked KGB archives, contained a single urgent message from archaeologist Dr. Alexei Petrov at a dig site near the Ural Mountains. Immediate evacuation required. Discovery contradicts all official historical frameworks. Cannot proceed without political guidance. Within hours, military units had cordoned off the excavation site. The research team was relocated to Moscow under what officials termed protective custody. Most significantly, orders came directly from party leadership to begin systematic suppression of archaeological evidence that challenged the official Soviet narrative of Russian cultural supremacy and Marxist historical determinism. Dr. Petrov had uncovered ruins of a sophisticated urban complex that predated known Russian settlements by over 3,000 years. The structures showed advanced engineering techniques, including metallurgy that surpassed contemporary Soviet capabilities, and architectural designs that demonstrated knowledge of advanced mathematics and astronomy. Most troubling for Soviet ideology was evidence that this civilization had achieved technological sophistication without following the stages of development that Marxist theory claimed were inevitable for human progress. The suppression apparatus that emerged from this discovery created one of history's most comprehensive systems for controlling archaeological knowledge. Unlike Western museums that concealed inconvenient artifacts while maintaining public educational missions, Soviet suppression operated through complete denial that controversial discoveries had ever occurred. Dig sites were sealed and reclassified as military installations. Research teams were disbanded and their members reassigned to projects that posed no ideological threats. Most significantly, evidence was not simply hidden, but systematically destroyed to ensure that future researchers could never uncover contradictory materials. Professor Irina Volkov, who served as an archaeological consultant to the Soviet Academy of Sciences from 1962 to 1987, documented this suppression process in memoirs published after the Soviet collapse. According to Volkov's account, the state maintained active suppression operations at over 200 archaeological sites across Soviet territory. These operations employed thousands of personnel whose primary function was ensuring that discoveries aligned with approved historical narratives or disappeared entirely. The ideological stakes driving Soviet suppression extended far beyond simple national pride. Marxist theory claimed that human societies developed through predictable stages: primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and finally socialism, with each stage representing inevitable progress toward communist perfection. Archaeological evidence of advanced ancient civilizations suggested that human development followed far more complex patterns, potentially including technological regression and civilizational collapse that contradicted assumptions about inevitable progress. The Siberian expeditions of the 1960s yielded discoveries that particularly threatened Soviet orthodoxy. Research teams uncovered extensive underground complexes showing evidence of advanced engineering, precision manufacturing, and what appeared to be energy generation systems using principles unknown to contemporary science. Rather than representing primitive societies progressing toward Soviet-style development, these sites suggested that ancient peoples had achieved technological capabilities that surpassed anything in the modern world. Dr. Viktor Mikhailov led several of these expeditions before his sudden disappearance in 1968. According to classified reports later obtained through post-Soviet archive releases, Mikhailov's team documented artifacts that demonstrated knowledge of atomic structure, genetic modification, and electromagnetic principles that wouldn't be formally recognized by Soviet science for decades. The implications challenged not only historical timelines, but fundamental assumptions about the relationship between technological advancement and political organization. The suppression of genetic research created particular tensions within Soviet archaeological programs. Ancient biological specimens showed evidence of selective breeding and modification techniques that suggested prehistoric peoples possessed sophisticated understanding of heredity and genetics. Such discoveries contradicted Lysenkoist theories that had become official Soviet doctrine, while simultaneously challenging Marxist assumptions about primitive ignorance of natural laws. Soviet suppression extended beyond simple concealment to active disinformation campaigns designed to discredit inconvenient discoveries. Archaeological reports were systematically falsified to support approved historical narratives. Dating techniques were manipulated to place advanced artifacts within acceptable timeframes. Most insidiously, authentic discoveries were mixed with deliberate fabrications to ensure that researchers could never distinguish genuine evidence from propaganda materials. The human cost of Soviet archaeological suppression proved particularly devastating due to the totalitarian nature of state control. Researchers who questioned official narratives faced not simply career termination but imprisonment in gulags or psychiatric facilities. Family members were often targeted to ensure compliance with suppression protocols. Most tragically, indigenous populations whose oral traditions contained knowledge of suppressed sites were systematically relocated or eliminated to prevent information from reaching academic researchers. The Kazakh expeditions of the 1970s revealed the extent to which Soviet authorities would go to maintain historical control. When archaeological teams discovered evidence of advanced metallurgy and astronomy among prehistoric nomadic peoples, party officials ordered the complete destruction of the sites rather than risk ideological contamination. Explosives were used to collapse underground chambers, while surface artifacts were ground up and scattered to prevent future discovery. Dr. Elena Rostova, a materials scientist who analyzed suppressed artifacts during the Brezhnev era, documented technologies that fundamentally challenged contemporary understanding of ancient capabilities. According to her research, published in Samizdat Circulation during the 1980s, Soviet facilities housed metallic alloys showing atomic-level precision, crystalline structures that generated electrical energy through unknown mechanisms, and mechanical devices that demonstrated knowledge of advanced physics principles. The international dimensions of Soviet suppression created complex relationships with archaeological establishments in other communist countries. East German researchers collaborated on projects to suppress Nazi-era discoveries, while simultaneously concealing their own controversial findings. Chinese archaeologists shared techniques for eliminating evidence of pre-revolutionary civilizations that challenged communist historical narratives. Most significantly, coordination protocols ensured that suppression efforts remained synchronized across the entire communist bloc. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 created unprecedented opportunities for exposing suppressed archaeological evidence. However, the transition to market capitalism generated new pressures for concealment as private interests acquired control over archaeological sites and materials. Corporate entities connected to energy, technology, and defense industries proved just as committed to suppressing inconvenient discoveries as their Soviet predecessors. Contemporary Russian archaeological policies continue patterns established during the Soviet era, though with different ideological justifications. Sites that might challenge narratives of Russian cultural superiority remain classified or inaccessible to international researchers. Indigenous communities in Siberia report ongoing harassment when they attempt to share traditional knowledge about ancient sites. Most significantly, corporate partnerships with government agencies ensure that potentially valuable discoveries remain under institutional control rather than contributing to public knowledge. Dr. Mikhail Petrov, son of the archaeologist who triggered the original 1956 suppression protocols, gained access to previously classified materials through post-Soviet archive releases. His research, published in limited circulation academic journals during the 2000s, revealed the scope of suppressed evidence across former Soviet territories. According to Petrov's documentation, artifacts demonstrating advanced ancient technologies remain in secure storage facilities, studied by classified research programs but denied to public scholarship. The technological implications of Soviet-era suppressions extend far beyond historical curiosity. Energy generation techniques documented at Siberian sites could address contemporary climate challenges if properly understood and developed. Manufacturing processes showing atomic-level precision could revolutionize industrial production. Most significantly, evidence of sustainable technologies developed by ancient civilizations could provide alternatives to resource-intensive systems that drive contemporary environmental crises. The financial resources dedicated to maintaining Soviet-era suppressions suggest their continuing perceived importance to state security. Conservative estimates place current Russian spending on archaeological suppression at over $100 million annually, including maintenance of secure facilities, compensation for researchers working under classification constraints, and coordination with international suppression networks that transcend national boundaries. Recent technological developments have created new challenges for maintaining Soviet-era suppressions. Satellite archaeology can detect artificial structures and anomalous materials without requiring ground access to classified sites. International database sharing allows researchers to compare findings across national boundaries, potentially exposing patterns of coordinated suppression. Most problematically, climate change is exposing previously frozen archaeological sites, revealing evidence that has remained hidden since Soviet suppression operations first concealed it. The ethical complexities surrounding Soviet archaeological suppression create ongoing dilemmas for contemporary Russian institutions. Acknowledging the extent of suppressed evidence would require admitting decades of systematic deception while potentially undermining current government authority. Yet continuing concealment prevents scientific advancement that could benefit not only Russian society, but global understanding of human technological development. The psychological impact on personnel involved in Soviet suppression operations appears to have created lasting trauma that extends across generations. Researchers forced to participate in evidence destruction report, experiencing persistent guilt and anxiety about their role in concealing human knowledge. Family members of suppressed scientists describe ongoing fears about discussing their relatives' work, even decades after the Soviet collapse. The question that emerges from examining Soviet archaeological suppression extends beyond simple institutional accountability. If state control over historical knowledge represents a fundamental tool of political power, what safeguards exist to prevent contemporary governments from implementing similar suppression systems? The ease with which democratic societies have adopted surveillance and information control technologies suggests that the Soviet model of archaeological suppression may represent a template rather than an historical anomaly. As evidence of Soviet suppression operations accumulates, patterns emerge connecting Russian activities with similar programs conducted simultaneously by other major powers. The networks of international cooperation in concealing archaeological evidence suggest that suppression transcends ideological boundaries, revealing a shared commitment among global elites to controlling knowledge that might challenge established power structures. The construction crew working on Beijing's subway expansion halted their drilling at precisely 2:47 p.m. on September 12, 2018. 40 meters beneath the modern city, their equipment had broken through into a vast chamber filled with artifacts that shouldn't exist according to official Chinese historical records. Within 6 hours, military personnel had cordoned off the site. By the following morning, the discovery had been classified at the highest levels of state security, and the construction workers had been relocated to distant provinces under what authorities termed employment opportunities. Dr. Chen Wei, a senior archaeologist with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, received the emergency summons at dawn on September 14th. Her instructions were specific: conduct a preliminary assessment of the underground site, document anything that supported official historical narratives, and recommend disposal protocols for materials that contradicted state-approved chronologies. What she discovered in the depths beneath Beijing would challenge everything the Chinese government claimed about the origins and development of Chinese civilization. The chamber stretched across an area larger than the Forbidden City above, its walls lined with inscriptions in scripts that predated known Chinese writing systems by thousands of years. Advanced engineering was evident throughout the structure: precision-cut stone blocks fitted together without mortar, ventilation systems that still functioned after millennia, and what appeared to be artificial lighting that activated when personnel entered specific areas. Most troubling for official narratives were artifacts demonstrating technological sophistication that contradicted carefully maintained stories about China's gradual development from primitive agricultural societies. The suppression apparatus that emerged from this discovery represented the culmination of decades of Chinese efforts to control archaeological knowledge. Unlike Western museums that concealed inconvenient artifacts while maintaining public educational missions, or Soviet operations that destroyed contradictory evidence entirely, Chinese suppression operated through systematic rewriting of archaeological findings to support official historical narratives while secretly studying suppressed materials for potential technological advantages. Professor Liu Xiaoming, who served as an archaeological consultant to the State Council from 1985 to 2012, documented this process in confidential reports later leaked through overseas Chinese democracy movements. According to Liu's testimony, the Chinese government maintains active suppression operations at over 300 archaeological sites across the country. These operations serve dual purposes, ensuring that discoveries support official narratives about Chinese cultural continuity and technological supremacy, while secretly extracting useful knowledge from ancient technologies. The ideological stakes driving Chinese suppression extend far beyond simple national pride. Official Communist Party doctrine claims that Chinese civilization represents 5,000 years of continuous development, with technological and cultural achievements flowing naturally from Chinese genius rather than external influences. Archaeological evidence of advanced civilizations predating known Chinese history, or suggesting significant cultural exchange with other regions, threatens fundamental assumptions about Chinese exceptionalism that justify continued party rule. The Gobi Desert expeditions of the 2000s yielded discoveries that particularly challenged official orthodoxy. Research teams uncovered extensive underground complexes showing evidence of advanced engineering, precision manufacturing, and what appeared to be energy generation systems using principles that contemporary Chinese science was only beginning to understand. Rather than representing early stages of Chinese development, these sites suggested that ancient peoples had achieved technological capabilities that surpassed anything in the modern world. Dr. Wang Feng led several of these expeditions before his arrest on charges of revealing state secrets in 2015. According to classified reports later obtained through intelligence sources, Wang's team documented artifacts that demonstrated knowledge of atomic structure, electromagnetic principles, and manufacturing techniques that wouldn't be formally recognized by Chinese academia for decades. The implications challenged not only historical timelines, but fundamental assumptions about the relationship between Chinese cultural development and technological advancement. The systematic rewriting of archaeological findings created particular tensions within Chinese academic institutions. Researchers were required to produce reports that supported official narratives regardless of actual discoveries, while secretly conducting parallel studies that analyzed suppressed materials for potential applications to contemporary technology development. This dual research system created psychological stress among academics who were forced to choose between intellectual integrity and professional survival. Chinese suppression extended beyond simple concealment to active archaeological fraud designed to support official historical narratives. Dating techniques were systematically manipulated to place advanced artifacts within acceptable timeframes that supported claims of Chinese technological priority. Foreign influences on Chinese development were systematically eliminated from archaeological reports, while evidence of Chinese technological capabilities was exaggerated to support superiority claims. The human cost of Chinese archaeological suppression proved particularly devastating due to the integration of suppression operations with broader social control systems. Researchers who questioned official narratives faced not simply career termination, but social credit system penalties that affected their families' access to education, employment, and travel opportunities. Local populations whose traditional knowledge contained information about suppressed sites were systematically relocated through rural development programs that served suppression functions. The Xinjiang expeditions of the 2010s revealed the extent to which Chinese authorities would go to maintain historical control. When archaeological teams discovered evidence of advanced civilizations among prehistoric populations that contradicted official narratives about Chinese settlement of the region. Military units sealed the sites and implemented systematic cultural suppression campaigns against local ethnic groups whose oral traditions contained inconvenient historical knowledge. Dr. Zhang Mei, a materials scientist who analyzed suppressed artifacts during the Xi Jinping era, documented technologies that fundamentally challenged contemporary understanding of ancient capabilities. According to her research, smuggled out through academic exchange programs, Chinese facilities housed metallic alloys showing molecular-level precision, crystalline structures that generated electrical energy through unknown mechanisms, and mechanical devices that demonstrated knowledge of advanced physics principles. The international dimensions of Chinese suppression created complex relationships with archaeological establishments in other countries. Cooperation agreements with Russian institutions allowed sharing of suppression techniques while coordinating efforts to prevent inconvenient discoveries from reaching Western researchers. Corporate partnerships with European and American entities ensured that potentially valuable technologies remained under state control rather than contributing to global scientific knowledge. The Belt and Road Initiative has created new opportunities for archaeological suppressions across multiple countries. Chinese-funded excavations in Central Asia, Africa, and Southeast Asia operate under protocols that ensure controversial discoveries are immediately classified and transferred to Beijing facilities. Local researchers in participating countries report pressure to suppress findings that might challenge Chinese historical narratives or reveal technological capabilities that contradict official chronologies. Dr. Li Jun, a contemporary Chinese archaeologist who defected to the United States in 2021, provided detailed documentation of ongoing suppression operations. According to Li's testimony, Chinese authorities maintain secure storage facilities housing thousands of artifacts that demonstrate advanced ancient technologies. These materials are studied by classified research programs affiliated with military and industrial development initiatives, but their existence is denied in public archaeological databases. The technological implications of Chinese-era suppressions extend far beyond historical curiosity. Energy generation techniques documented at Gobi sites could address contemporary climate challenges if properly understood and developed. Manufacturing processes showing molecular-level precision could revolutionize industrial production. Most significantly, evidence of sustainable technologies developed by ancient civilizations could provide alternatives to resource-intensive systems that drive contemporary environmental crises. The financial resources dedicated to maintaining Chinese archaeological suppression suggest their perceived importance to state security and technological development. Conservative estimates place current Chinese spending on archaeological suppression and related research at over 2 billion yuan annually, including maintenance of secure facilities, compensation for researchers working under classification constraints, and international coordination efforts that extend suppression capabilities across multiple countries. Recent technological developments have created new challenges for maintaining Chinese suppression operations. Satellite archaeology can detect artificial structures and anomalous materials without requiring ground access to classified sites. International academic cooperation allows researchers to compare findings across national boundaries, potentially exposing patterns of coordinated suppression. Most problematically, climate change and industrial development are exposing previously hidden archaeological sites, revealing evidence that contradicts official historical narratives. The integration of artificial intelligence and big data analysis into Chinese suppression operations represents a new frontier in archaeological control. Advanced algorithms can identify potentially problematic discoveries before they reach human researchers, automatically flagging materials that contradict official narratives for immediate classification. Digital databases can be programmed to prevent searches that might reveal suppressed evidence, while social media monitoring systems track researchers who express interest in controversial archaeological topics. The psychological impact on Chinese archaeological personnel appears particularly severe due to the integration of suppression activities with broader political control systems. Researchers report experiencing persistent anxiety about their work, never knowing whether their discoveries might be classified as state secrets or whether their professional activities might trigger political investigation. The stress of maintaining dual research programs, public work that supports official narratives and classified studies of suppressed materials, creates ongoing mental health challenges for academic personnel. The ethical complexities surrounding Chinese archaeological suppression extend beyond simple institutional accountability to questions about cultural heritage and human knowledge. If the Chinese government possesses evidence of advanced ancient technologies that could address contemporary global challenges, what obligations do they have to share this knowledge with humanity? The tension between protecting perceived national security interests and advancing scientific understanding creates moral complexities that extend far beyond Chinese borders. The question that emerges from examining Chinese archaeological suppression extends to the role of economic power in controlling historical knowledge. As China's economic influence expands globally, their suppression techniques and technologies become available to other governments seeking to control archaeological discoveries within their territories. The export of suppression capabilities represents a new form of authoritarianism that threatens archaeological freedom across multiple continents. As evidence of Chinese suppression operations accumulates, patterns emerge connecting Beijing's activities with similar programs conducted by corporate interests seeking to control potentially valuable archaeological discoveries. The networks of cooperation between state and private suppression operations suggest that archaeological control has become a fundamental tool of economic competition, with advanced ancient technologies representing strategic resources that powerful interests will suppress rather than allow public access. The board meeting took place on the 42nd floor of the Rockefeller Center on January 23, 2019, far from the public eye and completely absent from any official corporate records. Present were representatives from ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, and a dozen smaller energy companies, along with executives from major universities and archaeological institutions. The agenda contained a single item: containment protocols for energy-related archaeological discoveries. What transpired during that meeting would reshape how the world's most powerful corporations approached archaeological research that threatened their fundamental business models. Dr. Robert Sterling had called the meeting after receiving disturbing reports from archaeological sites across 3 continents. Corporate-funded expeditions were uncovering artifacts that demonstrated ancient civilizations had developed energy generation systems that operated without fossil fuels, requiring no external power sources and producing no environmental waste. More troubling still, preliminary analysis suggested these technologies could be reverse engineered using contemporary materials and manufacturing techniques. The implications for industries built on energy scarcity were catastrophic. The archaeological suppression network that emerged from Sterling's initiative represented something unprecedented in human history. The systematic concealment of knowledge not for political or religious reasons, but to protect corporate profit margins. Unlike government suppression operations that served ideological purposes, corporate archaeological control operated purely to maintain market advantages that would evaporate if alternative technologies became widely available. The Rockefeller Foundation had pioneered corporate influence over archaeological research during the early 20th century, funding expeditions and university programs that shaped how ancient civilizations were studied and interpreted. What began as philanthropic support for education gradually evolved into sophisticated control mechanisms that ensured archaeological discoveries supported, rather than threatened, established industrial interests. Professor Margaret Davidson, who served as an archaeological consultant to major energy companies from 2005 to 2018, documented this transformation in confidential reports later leaked through environmental activism networks. According to Davidson's testimony, corporate archaeological programs operated under strict protocols that required immediate classification of any discoveries suggesting alternatives to contemporary energy systems. The financial stakes driving corporate suppression extend far beyond simple profit protection. The global energy industry represents over $6 trillion in annual revenue, supported by infrastructure investments exceeding $100 trillion worldwide. Archaeological evidence of abundant, clean energy technologies developed by ancient civilizations threatens not merely current profitability, but the entire economic framework that sustains industrial civilization as currently organized. The Mesopotamian expeditions of the 2010s yielded discoveries that particularly alarmed corporate interests. Research teams uncovered extensive evidence of energy generation systems that operated using principles unknown to contemporary physics, including devices that appeared to extract power directly from environmental electromagnetic fields. Rather than representing primitive attempts at energy production, these systems demonstrated sophistication that surpassed anything in the modern world. Dr. James Morrison led several of these expeditions before his sudden termination from multiple university positions in 2017. According to classified reports later obtained through legal discovery processes, Morrison's team documented artifacts that demonstrated knowledge of zero-point energy, electromagnetic field manipulation, and what appeared to be controlled nuclear fusion using techniques that required no radioactive materials or high-temperature containment systems. The suppression of energy-related archaeological discoveries required unprecedented coordination between corporate interests and academic institutions. Universities received funding that came with explicit restrictions on publishing research that might threaten energy industry profits. Archaeological departments were restructured to ensure that personnel with access to potentially problematic discoveries remained under corporate influence. Most significantly, peer review processes were modified to prevent publication of research that challenged contemporary energy paradigms. Corporate suppression extended beyond simple concealment to active disinformation campaigns designed to discredit inconvenient discoveries. Research papers were deliberately falsified to misrepresent ancient energy systems as primitive and ineffective. Dating techniques were manipulated to place advanced technologies in timeframes that made them seem irrelevant to contemporary applications. Most insidiously, authentic discoveries were mixed with deliberate fabrications to ensure that researchers could never distinguish genuine evidence from corporate propaganda. The human cost of corporate archaeological suppression proved particularly devastating due to the integration of suppression operations with employment and funding systems that controlled researchers' professional survival. Scientists who pursued inconvenient lines of inquiry found their grants terminated, their academic positions eliminated, and their professional reputations systematically destroyed through campaigns that questioned their methodology and mental stability. The international dimensions of corporate suppression created complex networks of cooperation between companies, governments, and academic institutions across multiple countries. Multinational energy corporations coordinated suppression efforts through industry associations that shared techniques and resources for controlling archaeological research. Government agencies provided legal and regulatory support for corporate suppression operations while benefiting from tax revenues generated by energy industries. The Arctic expeditions of the 2020s revealed the extent to which corporate interests would go to maintain energy market control. When archaeological teams discovered evidence of advanced energy systems among prehistoric populations, corporate sponsors immediately classified the discoveries and implemented protocols to prevent similar findings from reaching public attention. Military contractors provided security services to ensure that suppressed sites remained inaccessible to independent researchers. Dr. Susan Crawford, a materials scientist who analyzed corporate-controlled artifacts during the Trump administration, documented technologies that fundamentally challenged contemporary understanding of energy production possibilities. According to her research, published through anonymous channels after her mysterious disappearance in 2020, corporate facilities housed devices that generated electrical power through unknown mechanisms, including systems that appeared to violate accepted principles of thermodynamics. The technological implications of corporate suppressed discoveries extend far beyond simple archaeological curiosity. Energy generation techniques documented at various sites could eliminate dependence on fossil fuels while providing abundant clean power for global development needs. Manufacturing processes powered by these systems could revolutionize industrial production while eliminating environmental pollution. Most significantly, widespread availability of these technologies could transform global economic relationships by eliminating energy scarcity as a tool of political control. The financial resources dedicated to maintaining corporate archaeological suppression suggest their perceived importance to industry survival. Conservative estimates place annual corporate spending on suppression activities at over $10 billion globally, including direct payments to archaeological teams, funding for cooperative universities, maintenance of secure storage facilities, and compensation for individuals willing to remain silent about their discoveries. Recent technological developments have created new challenges for maintaining corporate suppression operations. Advanced materials analysis can reveal energy generation principles without requiring access to complete ancient devices. International academic cooperation allows researchers to share findings across corporate jurisdictions, potentially exposing patterns of coordinated suppression. Most problematically, environmental pressures are forcing governments to consider alternative energy sources, creating political momentum that threatens corporate control over energy markets. The integration of corporate suppression with government energy policies represents a new frontier in archaeological control. Regulatory agencies staffed by former energy industry executives ensure that suppressed technologies remain classified even when developed through publicly funded research programs. Patent systems are manipulated to prevent independent researchers from developing alternative energy technologies, while classification protocols ensure that archaeological evidence remains under corporate control. The psychological impact on researchers involved in corporate suppression operations appears particularly severe due to the moral complexities of concealing knowledge that could address global environmental challenges. Scientists report experiencing persistent guilt about participating in suppression activities, while climate change threatens human civilization. The conflict between professional obligations and ethical responsibilities creates ongoing mental health challenges for personnel involved in corporate archaeological programs. The ethical complexities surrounding corporate archaeological suppression extend beyond simple environmental concerns to questions about corporate responsibility and human welfare. If energy companies possess evidence of clean, abundant technologies that could address climate change and global poverty, what obligations do they have to share this knowledge with humanity? The tension between protecting shareholder profits and advancing human welfare creates moral complexities that extend far beyond corporate boardrooms. Contemporary suppression efforts face increasing challenges from environmental activism and technological advancement. Whistleblowers within corporate systems provide evidence of ongoing concealment operations through secure communication networks that bypass corporate surveillance. International environmental organizations pressure companies to acknowledge their role in suppressing climate solutions, creating legal and political pressures that threaten industry control over energy technologies. The question that emerges from examining corporate archaeological suppression extends to the fundamental structure of economic systems that prioritize profit over human welfare. If private interests can systematically conceal knowledge that could benefit humanity, what safeguards exist to prevent corporate control from undermining scientific advancement and environmental protection? The ease with which energy companies have suppressed archaeological evidence suggests that corporate power represents an existential threat to human knowledge and planetary survival. As evidence of corporate suppression operations accumulates, patterns emerge connecting energy industry activities with broader networks of institutional control over archaeological knowledge. The cooperation between corporate interests and government agencies reveals how economic power can co-opt public institutions, transforming them from servants of human knowledge into protectors of private profit. Understanding corporate archaeological suppression requires examining how this model of control extends beyond energy companies to influence every aspect of contemporary archaeological research. The encrypted message appeared in Dr. Rachel Martinez's secure email account at 3:17 a.m. on November 9, 2022. The sender's identity was masked through multiple proxy servers, but the message's content was unmistakable. The network is ready. We have documentation from 17 institutions across 4 continents. The time for silence is over. Attached was a coordinate system that would lead her to a warehouse in industrial Baltimore, where she would meet other museum professionals who had reached the same devastating conclusion: the institutions they had devoted their careers to serving were systematically betraying their fundamental mission. Martinez had served as a senior curator at the National Museum of Natural History for 14 years, gradually becoming aware that significant portions of the collection remained permanently hidden from public view. Her growing suspicions crystallized during Elizabeth Hartwell's final months, when her colleagues' increasingly desperate warnings about basement operations had been dismissed as signs of mental instability. Elizabeth's subsequent death had convinced Martinez that institutional silence was not simply professional protocol, but active complicity in suppressing human knowledge. The warehouse meeting brought together 43 museum professionals from institutions across North America and Europe, each carrying documentation of suppression activities within their respective organizations. What emerged from their testimonies was evidence of a coordinated global network designed to ensure that controversial archaeological discoveries never reached public attention, regardless of their potential value to human understanding or technological advancement. Dr. Andreas Müller, a former curator from Berlin's Museum für Vor- und Frühgeschichte, presented evidence of systematic cooperation between German institutions and government agencies dating back to the Nazi era. According to Müller's documentation, post-war suppression protocols had simply been transferred from military to civilian control, with museums serving as repositories for artifacts too sensitive for public exhibition. The same basement facilities that once housed Nazi archaeological discoveries now contained materials that challenged contemporary historical narratives. The network that emerged from these meetings operated under protocols that ensured maximum security while facilitating information sharing among trusted participants. members used encrypted communication systems, shared documentation through secure servers located in countries with strong whistleblower protection laws, and coordinated activities to avoid patterns that might alert institutional security systems to their activities. Professor Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo's National Museum provided evidence of Asian suppression networks that connected Japanese institutions with Chinese and Korean facilities. According to Tanaka's research, artifacts demonstrating advanced prehistoric technologies were regularly transferred between museums to prevent any single institution from accumulating enough evidence to support comprehensive analysis. The coordination extended beyond simple concealment to active disinformation campaigns that misrepresented ancient achievements to support contemporary political narratives. The psychological toll on museum professionals involved in suppression activities became evident through testimonies shared during network meetings. Dr. Sarah Chen from the British Museum described the cognitive dissonance of working in institutions dedicated to education while actively concealing knowledge from the public. Multiple participants reported experiencing depression, anxiety, and what they termed moral injury from participating in systematic deception about human heritage. The documentation compiled by network members revealed the scope of institutional betrayal across the global museum system. Artifacts demonstrating advanced ancient technologies were housed in secure facilities at major institutions worldwide, studied by classified research programs but denied to public scholarship. The evidence included inventory lists, transfer records, and correspondence between museum officials and government agencies that coordinated suppression activities. Dr. Michael Thompson from the Louvre provided particularly damning evidence of corporate influence over museum operations. According to Thompson's documentation, major energy companies and technology corporations provided funding for museum programs that came with explicit restrictions on displaying or researching artifacts that might threaten their business interests. The financial dependence of museums on corporate sponsorship had created vulnerability to suppression pressures that extended far beyond government oversight. The international scope of museum suppression became clear through network coordination activities. Members in different countries reported identical protocols for handling controversial discoveries, suggesting centralized coordination that transcended national boundaries. Transfer records showed artifacts moving regularly between institutions in different countries, apparently to prevent concentrated analysis that might reveal patterns of advanced ancient technologies. Network activities extended beyond documentation to active resistance against suppression protocols. Members developed techniques for secretly photographing restricted artifacts, copying classified research documents, and maintaining communication with researchers who had been silenced or eliminated for pursuing inconvenient discoveries. The underground nature of these activities required sophisticated security measures to protect participants from institutional retaliation. Dr. Maria Santos from Madrid's Museo Archaeologico Nacional documented the human cost of suppression activities on indigenous communities whose cultural heritage was being systematically concealed. According to Santos's research, museum suppression operations had prevented traditional knowledge holders from accessing their own cultural materials, while simultaneously denying them credit for technological achievements that contemporary science was only beginning to understand. The technological implications of suppressed museum collections became evident through network research activities. Collaborative analysis of documented artifacts revealed consistent patterns of advanced ancient technologies across multiple civilizations and time periods. The evidence suggested that human technological development had followed far more complex patterns than official historical narratives acknowledged, including capabilities that surpassed contemporary achievement in specific areas. Network members developed techniques for bypassing institutional suppression through international cooperation that exploited gaps in coordination between different national museum systems. Researchers could sometimes access materials in foreign institutions that were suppressed in their home countries, allowing comparative analysis that revealed patterns hidden by individual institutional controls. The financial networks supporting museum suppression operations were exposed through accounting analysis conducted by network members with access to administrative records. The documentation revealed substantial funding streams from government agencies and corporate sponsors specifically designated for suppression activities, including maintenance of secure storage facilities, compensation for personnel involved in classification protocols, and coordination expenses for international suppression networks. Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the Australian Museum provided evidence of suppression activities targeting indigenous archaeological sites that contained evidence of advanced prehistoric technologies. According to Walsh's documentation, corporate mining interests had coordinated with government agencies and museum officials to ensure that discoveries threatening established historical narratives were immediately classified and removed from potential public access. The psychological warfare directed against network members became evident as institutional security systems detected and responded to resistance activities. Members reported increased surveillance of their professional activities, attempts to isolate them from colleagues, and systematic campaigns to discredit their professional competence. Several members experienced direct threats against their personal safety and that of their family members. Network security protocols evolved in response to institutional countermeasures, incorporating techniques developed by other whistleblower organizations and activist networks. Members learned to compartmentalize their activities, use sophisticated digital security measures, and maintain operational security that protected both their resistance activities and their ability to continue working within suppression institutions. The legal implications of museum suppression activities created complex challenges for network members who sought to expose institutional wrongdoing while protecting themselves from criminal prosecution. Existing whistleblower protection laws proved inadequate for addressing suppression of archaeological knowledge, while museum policies created contractual obligations that criminalized disclosure of classified materials. Contemporary museum suppression operations face increasing challenges from technological advancement that makes concealment more difficult to maintain. Digital imaging techniques can reveal details in artifacts that weren't visible to earlier researchers, while database sharing allows international comparison of findings that can expose patterns of coordinated suppression. Network members have begun exploiting these technological advantages to document and expose suppression activities. The ethical framework developed by network members balanced professional obligations to institutional employers against broader responsibilities to human knowledge and public welfare. The consensus that emerged prioritized transparency and public access to archaeological knowledge over institutional authority, while recognizing the personal risks that resistance activities created for individual participants. The question that drove network formation and activities extended beyond simple institutional accountability to fundamental questions about the purpose and responsibility of cultural institutions in democratic societies. If museums exist to preserve and share human knowledge, what justifies systematic concealment of discoveries that could advance scientific understanding and technological capability? The tension between institutional authority and public service revealed deep contradictions in how contemporary museums operate. As network activities expanded and documentation accumulated, patterns emerged connecting museum suppression with broader systems of knowledge control that extended across academic, corporate, and government institutions. The cooperation between museum officials and external suppression networks revealed how cultural institutions had been co-opted to serve interests that directly contradicted their stated educational missions. The underground resistance developing within global museum systems represents both a response to institutional betrayal and a potential catalyst for transforming how archaeological knowledge is preserved and shared. Yet the network's activities also reveal the extent to which suppression has become embedded in institutional structures, suggesting that exposing hidden collections may require not simply whistleblowing, but fundamental restructuring of how museums operate and serve the public interest. The server farm hummed with the quiet intensity of 20,000 processors working in perfect coordination, their combined computational power focused on a single task, systematically erasing human history from the digital realm. Located in a nondescript building outside Virginia's data center corridor, the facility operated under corporate contracts that officially provided database optimization services to archaeological institutions worldwide. In reality, the algorithms running across those servers were conducting the most comprehensive suppression of knowledge in human history, using artificial intelligence to identify and eliminate evidence of advanced ancient civilizations before researchers could access it. Dr. Kevin Park discovered the operation quite by accident while investigating inconsistencies in archaeological databases for his research on prehistoric metallurgy. What began as routine data mining for his dissertation revealed systematic patterns of information deletion across multiple institutional databases. Research papers vanished from academic servers, artifact images disappeared from museum collections, and dating records were retroactively modified to support approved historical narratives. Most disturbing was the sophistication of the deletion protocols. Evidence was removed so seamlessly that most researchers never realized information had been available. The digital suppression infrastructure that Park uncovered represented the evolution of knowledge control into the 21st century. Unlike physical suppression that required securing artifacts in basement vaults, digital suppression could eliminate evidence of discoveries without ever touching the original materials. More insidiously, digital suppression could modify information rather than simply hiding it, creating false historical records that supported desired narratives while making contrary evidence appear never to have existed. The artificial intelligence systems conducting digital suppression operated through multiple layers of analysis that identified potentially problematic content before human researchers could access it. Machine learning algorithms trained on approved historical narratives automatically flagged research papers, artifact descriptions, and archaeological reports that contradicted established timelines. These materials were then either eliminated entirely or modified to remove inconvenient information while leaving the appearance of legitimate scholarship. Sarah Chen, a former Google engineer who worked on archaeological database projects before her termination in 2021, provided insider testimony about corporate involvement in digital suppression operations. According to Chen's leaked documentation, major technology companies had developed specialized algorithms for identifying and suppressing archaeological content that threatened corporate or government interests. The same artificial intelligence systems that powered search engines and social media platforms were being used to control access to human heritage. The scope of digital suppression became evident through analysis of database modification logs that Park obtained through hacking operations conducted with the Curator underground network. The evidence revealed coordinated suppression activities across hundreds of institutions worldwide, with identical deletion patterns suggesting centralized control over global archaeological information systems. Research papers documenting advanced ancient technologies were being systematically eliminated from academic databases, while artifact images showing impossible precision or sophistication disappeared from museum collections. The human cost of digital suppression extended beyond simple information loss to active manipulation of scientific research. Graduate students found their dissertation research undermined when source materials disappeared without warning. Established researchers discovered that papers they had published years earlier had been retroactively modified to remove controversial conclusions. Most tragically, indigenous communities lost access to digital records of their own cultural heritage as algorithms identified traditional knowledge as threatening to approved historical narratives. The technological sophistication of suppression algorithms created new challenges for researchers attempting to access authentic information. Advanced pattern recognition systems could identify researchers whose search patterns suggested interest in controversial topics, automatically restricting their access to potentially problematic materials. Social media monitoring allowed suppression systems to track researchers' professional activities and personal communications, enabling preemptive censorship before controversial information could be shared. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a computer scientist who analyzed suppression algorithms for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, documented the techniques used to manipulate search results and database queries. According to Rodriguez's research, published through encrypted channels in 2022, suppression systems could modify search results in real time to prevent researchers from discovering evidence of advanced ancient technologies while maintaining the appearance of providing comprehensive access to archaeological information. The international cooperation required for effective digital suppression revealed unprecedented coordination between technology companies, government agencies, and academic institutions across multiple countries. Shared databases allowed synchronization of suppression activities worldwide, while standardized algorithms ensured that controversial content was identified and eliminated consistently, regardless of its original source. The result was a global information control system that operated largely invisibly to researchers attempting to access archaeological knowledge. The financial resources dedicated to digital suppression operations suggested their perceived importance to suppression networks. Conservative estimates placed annual spending on digital suppression at over $5 billion globally, including development and maintenance of specialized algorithms, operation of secure server facilities, and coordination systems that managed suppression activities across hundreds of institutions. The investment represented a substantial commitment to preventing public access to controversial archaeological information. Corporate involvement in digital suppression extended beyond simple technological services to direct control over archaeological information systems. Major technology companies had acquired databases containing archaeological records, allowing them to control access to information while claiming to provide public services. Academic institutions increasingly depended on corporate-provided platforms for research activities, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited for suppression purposes. The psychological impact on researchers who discovered digital suppression operations proved particularly severe due to the comprehensive nature of information manipulation. Unlike physical suppression that left evidence of concealment, digital suppression created uncertainty about what information had ever existed. Researchers began experiencing what psychologists termed reality distortion syndrome, persistent anxiety about the authenticity of information and their ability to distinguish genuine from manipulated data. Resistance to digital suppression required sophisticated technical expertise that few archaeologists possessed independently. Collaborations developed between research networks and digital rights organizations, combining archaeological knowledge with cybersecurity skills to develop techniques for bypassing suppression algorithms. These efforts included creation of alternative databases, development of encrypted communication systems, and deployment of distributed storage networks that prevented centralized control over archaeological information. The legal framework governing digital suppression operations remained largely undefined, creating opportunities for expansion of censorship activities without clear regulatory oversight. Technology companies could modify algorithms and database access protocols without public notification or legal review, while claiming that changes served legitimate purposes, such as combating misinformation or improving user experience. The result was systematic erosion of access to archaeological information without corresponding accountability mechanisms. Contemporary digital suppression operations face challenges from advancing encryption technologies and distributed information systems that make centralized control more difficult to maintain. Blockchain-based storage systems allow creation of tamper-proof records that resist algorithmic manipulation, while peer-to-peer networks enable information sharing that bypasses corporate-controlled platforms. However, these same technologies can be co-opted by suppression networks to create more sophisticated control systems. The integration of artificial intelligence into archaeological research created new opportunities for both advancing and suppressing knowledge. Machine learning systems could analyze vast data sets to identify patterns that human researchers might miss, potentially revealing evidence of advanced ancient technologies. However, the same systems could be programmed to identify and suppress inconvenient discoveries before they reached human awareness, creating automated censorship that operated without direct human oversight. The ethical implications of digital suppression extended beyond simple questions of information access to fundamental concerns about the nature of knowledge and truth in digital societies. If algorithms could systematically manipulate historical information to support preferred narratives, what safeguards existed to preserve authentic archaeological knowledge for future generations? The ease with which digital systems could be modified suggested that contemporary suppression might represent only the beginning of comprehensive information control. Dr. Michael Chang, a digital archaeologist who developed techniques for detecting algorithmic manipulation of archaeological databases, documented patterns of suppression that revealed coordination between seemingly independent institutions. According to Chang's analysis, published through anonymous channels after his university terminated his position, suppression algorithms showed identical signatures across multiple platforms, suggesting centralized development and deployment of censorship technologies. The question that emerged from investigating digital suppression operations extended to the fundamental structure of information systems in democratic societies. If private companies could systematically control access to archaeological knowledge while claiming to provide neutral platforms, what mechanisms existed to ensure that digital infrastructure served public rather than private interests? The concentration of information control in the hands of technology companies created unprecedented opportunities for suppression that operated largely beyond public awareness or accountability. As evidence of digital suppression accumulated, patterns emerged connecting technological censorship with broader networks of institutional control over archaeological knowledge. The integration of algorithmic suppression with physical concealment and corporate influence revealed a comprehensive system designed to prevent public access to evidence of advanced ancient civilizations. Understanding digital suppression required recognizing how information technology had become the primary battlefield for controlling human knowledge in the 21st century. Yet the same digital technologies that enabled suppression also created unprecedented opportunities for preserving and sharing archaeological knowledge through decentralized networks that resisted institutional control. The emerging conflict between suppression algorithms and resistance technologies would determine whether the digital age represented the ultimate triumph of knowledge control or the liberation of human heritage from institutional gatekeepers. The livestream began at exactly midnight UTC on March 15th, 2024, broadcasting simultaneously across 47 encrypted platforms to an audience that would grow to 12 million viewers within the first hour. The transmission originated from an undisclosed location, showing a figure in shadow standing before a wall of artifacts that officially did not exist. Behind the mask that concealed their identity, the anonymous broadcaster spoke words that would shatter decades of institutional silence. Tonight, we return humanity's stolen heritage. Tonight, the vaults are opened. What followed over the next 6 hours would become known as the Great Archaeological Revelation, the largest simultaneous leak of suppressed historical materials in human history. Documents flooded secure servers. Photographs appeared on blockchain networks immune to deletion. And video evidence emerged from basement facilities across the globe. The suppression apparatus that had operated in darkness for over a century found itself suddenly exposed to the harsh light of global scrutiny. The orchestration of this unprecedented disclosure required coordination among resistance networks that had been developing in secret for years. The Curator underground provided access to restricted facilities, while digital activists created secure communication channels that bypassed corporate surveillance systems. Indigenous communities contributed traditional knowledge that had been systematically excluded from academic research, while whistleblowers within government agencies provided classified documents that revealed the scope of institutional suppression. Dr. Rachel Martinez, whose involvement with the Curator underground had led to this moment, watched the live stream from a secure location in Iceland, knowing that her professional life was ending even as humanity's understanding of its past was about to be transformed. The artifacts being revealed on screen represented only a fraction of the materials hidden in institutional vaults, but they were chosen for maximum impact on public consciousness and scientific understanding. The first revelations focused on energy technologies that demonstrated ancient civilizations had achieved capabilities that surpassed contemporary understanding. Detailed documentation showed metallic devices that generated electrical power without fuel or external energy sources, crystalline structures that appeared to manipulate electromagnetic fields, and mechanical systems that operated using principles unknown to modern physics. The implications for addressing contemporary energy challenges were immediate and undeniable. The medical technologies revealed during the broadcast challenged every assumption about ancient knowledge and capabilities. Surgical instruments showing precision that required microscopic manufacturing, pharmaceutical formulations that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of biochemistry, and diagnostic tools that appeared to analyze genetic information at the molecular level. These discoveries suggested that ancient healers had possessed medical knowledge that contemporary science was only beginning to approach. Perhaps most shocking were the astronomical instruments that revealed ancient civilizations had achieved understanding of cosmic phenomena that officially remained unknown until the space age. Star charts showing galaxies invisible to terrestrial observation, mathematical calculations describing planetary movements with satellite-level precision, and navigation tools that accounted for relativistic effects in ways that shouldn't have been possible without advanced physics knowledge. The resistance networks had prepared for the inevitable response from suppression institutions. As the revelations continued, cyber attacks targeted the broadcast servers, legal injunctions sought to halt the transmissions, and government agencies mobilized to contain the information flow. However, the distributed nature of the broadcasting system and the preparation of resistance networks allowed the revelations to continue despite coordinated suppression efforts. The human stories revealed during the broadcast proved as compelling as the technological discoveries. Family members of researchers who had died under suspicious circumstances spoke about their loved ones' final warnings about institutional suppression. Indigenous elders shared traditional knowledge that had been systematically excluded from academic research, while museums displayed artifacts stripped of their cultural context. Museum employees described the psychological toll of participating in suppression operations, while institutions claimed to serve public education. The corporate response to the revelations revealed the extent to which private interests had infiltrated archaeological institutions. Energy companies immediately began legal challenges to prevent analysis of ancient power generation technologies, while technology corporations sought to suppress evidence of advanced manufacturing techniques that might threaten their patent portfolios. The coordination of corporate suppression efforts demonstrated the degree to which profit motives had corrupted scientific research. Government agencies across multiple countries activated emergency protocols designed to contain the release of classified archaeological materials. However, the international scope of the revelations and the distributed nature of the broadcasting systems prevented effective suppression. As information spread across social media platforms and independent news networks, the scale of institutional deception became impossible to deny or contain. The scientific community's response to the revelations revealed deep divisions between researchers committed to advancing knowledge and those protecting institutional interests. Younger scientists embraced the opportunity to study previously suppressed materials, while established academics worried about the implications for their careers and research programs. The controversy exposed how academic institutions had been co-opted by suppression networks through funding dependencies and career incentive structures. The international political implications of the revelations created tensions between countries that had cooperated in suppression activities and nations that had been excluded from accessing suppressed technologies. Developing countries demanded access to ancient technologies that could address energy and medical challenges, while developed nations sought to maintain control over potentially valuable discoveries. The conflict threatened international cooperation agreements that had maintained suppression coordination for decades. Indigenous communities responded to the revelations with both vindication and anger, seeing their traditional knowledge validated while recognizing the extent to which their cultural heritage had been systematically stolen and suppressed. Legal challenges emerged demanding repatriation of cultural materials, while academic institutions faced pressure to acknowledge indigenous contributions to scientific understanding that had been erased from historical records. The public response to the revelations exceeded all expectations, with millions of people around the world demanding access to their hidden heritage. Protests emerged at major museums and universities, calling for full disclosure of suppressed collections. Political movements formed around principles of knowledge, transparency, and institutional accountability. Most significantly, crowdfunding campaigns raised hundreds of millions of dollars to support independent archaeological research free from institutional control. The technological implications of the revealed artifacts created immediate demands for research programs to understand and potentially replicate ancient technologies. However, the same institutional networks that had suppressed the discoveries continue to control access to the physical materials needed for comprehensive analysis. The conflict between public demand for knowledge and institutional control over archaeological materials created ongoing tensions that threatened to destabilize academic and political systems. The verification of revealed materials required independent analysis by researchers outside suppression networks. International teams of scientists volunteered to conduct authentication studies, while universities in countries with strong academic freedom protections established programs to study leaked documentation. The results consistently confirmed the authenticity of suppressed materials while revealing even more extensive evidence of advanced ancient capabilities. The legal challenges emerging from the revelations created complex questions about ownership of archaeological knowledge and the responsibilities of institutions that had systematically concealed human heritage. Class action lawsuits sought compensation for communities whose cultural materials had been suppressed, while criminal charges were filed against officials who had participated in knowledge suppression operations. The legal framework for addressing institutional suppression remained largely undefined, creating uncertainty about accountability mechanisms. The psychological impact of the revelations on global consciousness proved profound, challenging fundamental assumptions about human development and technological progress. The recognition that advanced civilizations had existed in prehistory forced reconsideration of contemporary achievements and capabilities. Many people experienced what psychologists termed historical vertigo, disorientation caused by the collapse of accepted timelines and narratives about human development. The resistance networks that had organized the revelations continued their efforts to expose additional, suppressed materials while protecting participants from institutional retaliation. Secure communication systems allowed coordination of ongoing disclosure activities, while legal support networks provided protection for whistleblowers facing criminal prosecution. The success of the initial revelations encouraged additional insiders to come forward with evidence of suppression activities. The question that emerged from the great archaeological revelation extended beyond simple institutional accountability to fundamental concerns about the structure of knowledge systems in contemporary society. If major institutions could systematically suppress evidence of advanced ancient civilizations for decades without public awareness, what other knowledge might be hidden from human understanding? The revelations suggested that suppression of archaeological evidence represented only one aspect of broader systems designed to control public access to information that might challenge established power structures. As the immediate shock of the revelations began to fade, attention turned to the long-term implications for human understanding and technological development. The evidence of advanced ancient capabilities suggested that contemporary civilization might represent not the pinnacle of human achievement, but merely one point in a much longer and more complex story of technological development and loss. The challenge facing humanity was not simply recovering suppressed knowledge, but learning from the apparent cycles of advancement and collapse that the archaeological record revealed. The vaults had been opened, but the contents they had hidden for so long would require generations to fully understand and integrate into human knowledge. The real work of breaking the suppression apparatus was only beginning, as resistance networks sought to transform the institutions that had betrayed their public mission and ensure that human heritage would never again be stolen from those who created it. The battle for archaeological freedom had been won, but the war for knowledge transparency was just beginning.